War is, needless to say, a key theme in the Star Wars universe, and the series follows a string of conflicts from all corners of the galaxy. However, warfare is always changing, so it does become a question: how did warfare evolve over the course of the Star Wars timeline trilogy? Now, for this video, we're going to be focusing on the three trilogies as opposed to looking at pre-Clone Wars Legends material. Although the inhabitants of the galaxy will have been fighting basically as long as they've been around, I really want to keep this on a strictly canon basis. As well as this, as I said in the previous video, the Clone Wars is really the first big galactic conflict in the galaxy to happen in over a millennia. And that really makes it incredibly important, as everything that happened from here in the next few decades will have shaped the face of warfare. So let's get started with the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars is likely the largest of these three conflicts, as we see it on an entire galactic frame. However, it's arguably the most unique, because it wasn't actually galactic citizens fighting, it was mostly a proxy war between a manufactured clone army and a manufactured droid army. And although the two sides used very different strategies, in general, these wars were far more utilitarian. It was more about which side could outspend the other. Both factions had very wealthy benefactors, and many in the galaxy were not overtly displaced by this war. The Republic's clone army was far more conservative in how it fought. It didn't want to sacrifice too many of its soldiers, and they were well trained and they were well equipped, unlike the droid army, which in many cases was just used as cannon fodder to overwhelm the enemy's positions. And these two very different strategies would completely affect how both the Rebels and the Empire, the First Order and the Resistance would fight in the coming years. Now, unfortunately, the Empire's main quality that they took from the Clone Wars was the extendability of human life. Now, at this point, they're recruiting from humans in just the general population of the galaxy, and it had no qualms about throwing ill-equipped, untrained troops to die, so long as it gained them victory in the end. Meanwhile, the rebellion, although to a lesser extent, was launching a full-blown guerrilla war against its enemies. The problem here is that warfare had become far less formal. It became brutal in many ways during the Galactic Civil War. Both sides were willing to throw lives away on suicidal offensives. And that includes the rebellion. I mean, do you remember Scarif? Those soldiers went there basically knowing they would die. And this is possibly a side effect from the Clone Wars. War was no longer seen as a big deal, lives had lost much of their value, as for 3 years it wasn't a concern. So as long as it could be afforded financially, people in general were pretty cool with a loss of life. Now eventually we get to the Resistance First Order conflict. We're not going to include the New Republic, as the New Republic was kind of an anomaly because it was very strictly pacifist. And it was due to this pacifism that the First Order was actually able to grow powerful enough to eventually destroy the New Republic. And this is even more of an extreme case. By this point, both factions fighting in this galactic conflict were technically illegal. The First Order had begun construction on an army that was mostly made up of brainwashed children, further distancing them from the war and the repercussions of the loss of life, meaning that the First Order had no issue whatsoever in killing countless members of its own military to achieve a victory. Meanwhile, the Resistance, again, isn't much better. It's a reliance on dumb luck and convenient story writing that allowed it to gain victory. However, in reality, you've got to understand how the Resistance actually fought the war, and this goes for the Rebel Alliance too, was ridiculous. They regularly engaged on just suicidal ventures, and because it's convenient for the story, a lot of the time they survive, but in reality, you've got to think about all the times it didn't work. It's very easy to see why the Empire had no issue calling the Rebels a terrorist organization, because at the end of the day, that's what most of their offensives will have looked like. Just people completely insane engaging on death-defying missions and often dying in the process. Not to mention, since warfare at this point had become so informal, you can only imagine the amount of war crimes that had been committed and the amount of innocent lives lost. These two later conflicts mark when nobody was held accountable for their actions. But by this point, the galaxy had been in almost a constant state of war for so long, it was almost impossible for people to keep track of what was happening. Ultimately, I believe that the Republic and CIS's handling of the Clone Wars was what gave the people of the galaxy an uncomfortable familiarity with war. It was no longer abhorrent or wrong, because ultimately the value of people's lives was incredibly diminished by all the governments that followed. And if people don't value lives, if they don't fear or hate war, then they won't be in any hurry to end it. And they're not going to learn from their mistakes. It'll just keep on happening and keep on happening. And that's currently the rut that probably the Star Wars universe is very much in. However, whichever conflict comes after the Resistance First Order fight, who knows? But what do you guys think? How did warfare evolve over the time span of the 3 trilogies? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If so, please remember to like, share and sub, as it's really appreciated and it helps the channel grow. Also, I do want to apologise for the lack of videos over the last few days. I've been doing deadlines for uni, which are still in, despite current events. It's an absolute nightmare. But I am going to continue to work on getting videos out as much as possible. Also, while you are here, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @TheLoreGuy and tick the bell for regular updates. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all doing great, and I'll see you next time.